This is from Britt Daniels, who's the lead of the rock band Spoon. He said once in Rolling Stone, "Inspiration likes to find you working." And I really like this quote. Inspiration likes to find you working. And I take it to mean sort of that, even though I don't know what I want to be doing next for my next startup, I like to be working on something, always having new ideas, because I think that ideas sort of come from exposure to different things and different experiences in your life, and to be able to take the experiences that you have working, whether it's full-time at a company or on side projects or whatever you're doing, to sort of be able to incorporate those experiences into whatever you're going to do next. And I think some of the most successful people are people who just try a million different things and they fail miserably, but they keep trying. I had a friend at one of the companies I worked with. His name is Tim Anderson, and he's the inventor of the 3D printer. This is pretty cool, right? The 3D printer that prints on like little pieces of biscuit, and it layers up and it prints 3D things. So he invented a 3D printer, right? Which is very, very cool. And what I really liked about Tim was that I saw him every day for work. He worked in the same building as me. And he had a different invention every day. And some of his inventions were really cool. Like some were like, hey, check out this cool new way to put like another wheel on a skateboard and do this crazy thing. But some of his ideas were really, really, really bad. Like freeze-dried watermelon. Watermelon is mostly water. When you freeze-dry it, it's not that good. All right. So anyways, now is better than never. Although never is often better than right now. And this is something that I've had to think about a lot in thinking about doing another startup is I'm not telling you to not do a startup, but that, like I said, it's a little bit complicated and not to force it too much. And oftentimes it takes sort of the perfect storm of having the right idea at the right time, and most importantly, sort of the right people to work with. I got pretty lucky with Pounce. Like, it happened to be a good time in my life for me to do a startup. I happened to find co-founders that were very good and fit sort of different roles that I needed. And I think it's pretty hard to find those sort of things to put together to do a project. You need the right people, the right idea, and it needs to be a right time for the product or the project to be successful. So I think we discussed this. So start your project now, but keep in mind if you don't have a project to work on, don't stress over it. Just keep working. Keep working in Python. Keep trying new things. All right. If an implementation is hard to explain, it's a bad idea. So I think a lot about the pitches that startups give when they're telling you what their product is. So new projects, you have to be able to explain them, and I think the implementation being sort of like the project idea. If you can't sum it up in one sentence, it's probably not a good idea. And if it's too complicated to explain, it's often too complicated to use. So I'll give an example of this. I'm going to pick on my former employer, 6apart. So 6apart acquired Pounce, and recently they merged with VideoEgg, or they were acquired by VideoEgg, and they became a new company called Say Media. And they got picked apart a little bit by bloggers because their description of their new company was a little bit vague. So bear with me on this one. So they said on their website, so what is Say Media? Through the creation of social hubs and influencer-driven custom content programs linked to the innovative ad frames offering, Say Media delivers engagement across display and mobile. So I don't know if the translation worked for that. If it didn't, don't worry, it didn't make sense in English either. I think that's sort of the point. Is the translation going okay for everything else? Is it mostly okay? Translating okay? All right. So don't worry if you didn't get that one. It's a complicated description for what should be sort of a simple idea, right? So Say Media, sells ads. So if you said we sell ads, it makes ads for blogs. It's a lot more sense. So Pounce was pretty simple. We had send stuff to your friends, and I think it's really important to sort of, when I start a new project, to know how to explain it in a sentence and be able to explain it well. So if the implementation is hard to explain, it's a bad idea. If the implementation is easy to explain, it may be a good idea. So if it's easy, so this is confusing. If it's hard to explain, it's a bad idea. If it's easy to explain, it may be a good idea. And I think what this means in terms of product and projects is that not everything simple is good. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes something is too simple and it ends up being dull. The example I can think of this is sometimes I'll hear people talk about an idea that they have for a company, and they'll say, it's like X plus Y put together. It's like Twitter plus Foursquare, and it's just not exciting to me. Like, I mean, I think it's important that what you're doing solves a real problem. It's interesting and it's new. And sometimes if it's not a little bit hard, it might not be new enough, right? So if the implementation is easy to explain, it might be a good idea. Something like this new thing we're adding to email that makes your inbox easier to filter. That's a pretty good idea, right? And it's simple to explain, but it's, something, you have to be careful that it's not too simple, right? So, anyways, moving on. Namespaces are one honking great idea. Let's do more of those. So this is the last line. This is my last slide. Namespaces are one honking great idea. Let's do more of those. Besides the usage of honking, which is interesting, I was trying to come up with how does this apply to startups. So namespaces are kind of a very programming specific term, I guess. Like, I don't think you'd use the term namespaces in really talking about anything else. So in Python, namespaces keep your code separate and clean, right? So having everything have its own namespace means that you don't have like global variables mixed in with your local variables, and you don't have any problems with things clashing, and that you can write libraries and people can use your libraries and things are encapsulated within that library, and you're able to reuse code. So this is why it's a good idea for Python. Makes a lot of sense to have namespaces. But how do namespaces apply to startups? So I spent some time thinking about this one. I spent a lot of time thinking about Pounce. So I've talked a lot about Pounce today, but I haven't talked about Pounce in a long time, because Pounce hasn't been around for about 2 years. So when I think about Pounce, I actually think about this idea of namespaces. So Pounce is gone now, but I mean, I feel lucky that you all are here to see me speak today about Pounce, but I think part of that was that there are things from Pounce that sort of live on. And some of the things that we worked on with Pounce have actually gotten better and continued on. So for example, how many of you have ever used OAuth authentication, API authentication, OAuth? Is that coming through okay in the translation? So it's sort of a mechanism for authenticating with APIs, and it's used by companies like Google and Yahoo, and now Twitter use this for you to authenticate for their API. But that actually, it was interesting because I started working on OAuth with Pounce before it was even a thing. Like, it didn't exist. I started working on it because I was interested in APIs, and we got a group of about 10 to 20 people would meet and we'd discuss, can we create a standard specification for doing token-based authentication for APIs based on sort of Flickr's token-based authentication. And what's interesting about the OAuth project was that, even though Pounce isn't around anymore, OAuth is more popular than ever. So it's interesting that sort of like the work that we did on OAuth for Pounce, I ended up writing like the first ever library for OAuth, the first implementation, open source implementation of OAuth, and the first library. And so I'm sad that Pounce is gone, but it's really neat to see things like that sort of live on and get bigger. And that's one of the really fun things about doing a startup is if you do this, if you keep namespaces and you keep your code separate. OAuth wasn't just written for Pounce. I could have written my own authentication system, but I think the idea is because we worked together and kept it as a separate project, we kept it in its own namespace. It was able to continue on. There's some other things from Pounce that I'm really happy that have lived on. Things like, has anybody used the Django Debug Toolbar project? Django Debug Toolbar? Cool, it's really nice. And I feel really, I have a special place in my heart for the Django Debug Toolbar because I was giving a talk I wasn't giving a talk. Cal Henderson was giving a talk at DjangoCon in Mountain View at the Google headquarters, and he needed a screenshot of Pounce for a joke. He was telling a joke, and it ended with Pounce as the punchline. And he wanted a slide of Pounce, so I took a quick screenshot from my own local development environment, and he used it in his slide. And at the very top was the Pounce debug toolbar. And we hadn't written this as a separate component. It just appeared in one slide, and people said, "That looks cool, what is that?" And a group of Django developers went out and actually built a really awesome debug toolbar, like in the slide, and now everybody can use it. So they took kind of an idea that could have been just for Pounce only, and they really, I mean, that's what's great about the Django community, taking these ideas and sort of continuing and building upon them. And Rails ended up copying the Django toolbar, and then Django made a new Django toolbar, and now Rails looks like the old Django toolbar. Anyways, it's all very exciting, and it's very cool, and it's one of the reasons I really like doing startups and doing very public social projects. Is it's really nice to sort of see these things sort of continue on in other projects and really, you know, make the web better. And so I think when we talk about namespaces, it really made these sort of things possible. It was tools that weren't built solely for Pounce. We could have built OAuth as a secret internal thing. We could have built OEmbed as a secret internal thing. OEmbed is sort of an API specification for retrieving photos and videos from websites. So if you put in a link to YouTube, you get back a video from YouTube. For example, it's used in the new, has anybody seen the new Twitter? The new Twitter, the new UI for Twitter, right? So they do photos and videos and things in line. They use OEmbed, which is really interesting because we published it as just like a recommendation for sites for Pounce. It was actually built for Pounce. If you put in a link in Pounce, it turned it into a photo or a video, and it was a way that we could have all of the content providers, like YouTube uses it, Flickr, Vimeo, these photo sites or photo and video sites could implement it, and we could easily support them. And it was something we wrote for Pounce, and when Pounce went away, OEmbed kind of had no use. So nobody was really using it all these people were publishing it, right? So Flickr publishes OEmbed, YouTube publishes OEmbed, big sites. But nobody was able to consume it, and Twitter adopted it, and now it has a use again. So that makes me very happy, and it's one of these things I'm really excited about. And I'm really glad that we published that specification instead of just sending an email to our friends at YouTube or sending an email to someone and doing it under the table. We published it right away. We just said, here's what we expect. We think this works out well. And it was written by myself and some Flickr engineers and Mike Malone, who's a Pounce engineer. So there were 4 of us, but it was half Flickr, half Pounce. And so it was really nice that it was open and people were able to communicate about it. So I think this is sort of one of these things that also affects startups and contemporary startups these days, is that you're able to make projects in the open source world, right? You can do specifications and open source software that can be reused. So things from Pounce that can be reused, like OAuth, OEmbed, Django debug toolbar, even really small ideas, like we've made some suggestions for multi-DB support in Django. Whether they took our suggestions or not, we're unsure. But it's cool that as a company we could participate in those discussions and what was going on. And I think that's part of Namespaces, our one honking great idea, is because one of the things you don't think about is that someday your project may be gone. And it's really nice to know, like I feel great to know that Pounce ends up living on in a lot of other projects. And for me that's really rewarding and keeps me from getting too sad about it. So that's my Zen of Startups. Thank you. And I guess I think I have time for a couple questions. 15 minutes? 12 minutes? Okay.
Repetindo então o procedimento das perguntas, o pessoal vem aqui na frente, fala em português e ele vai fazer a tradução para ela pegar em inglês para a gente capturar o áudio. Okay, so, first question.
Eu tenho uma pergunta e 50 sugestões. Não, só uma pergunta hoje. Lia, eu já abri uma companhia aqui no Brasil e fechei ela. Então, só a título de comparação,
Eu queria saber quanto tempo levou para você materializar a tua startup legalmente e quanto tempo levou para fechar ela. Só para a título de comparação, a minha levou 3 meses para abrir e 6 meses para fechar, que foi muito rápido.
So to close it, I'm not sure if the legal. If it's a legal issue or if it's a user issue. I have to take that off. I can't listen to both at the same time. Very confusing. It's so cool that you guys were able to follow along with the talk. But yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting experience shutting down a website. For us, legally, the company was acquired by 6apart, so they bought all the assets, and I didn't actually really deal with the legal part of it. We had a lawyer that did the whole sort of thing, and 6apart has made acquisitions before, so they had sort of gone through that process. So legally, I didn't do very much. In terms of community support, it was really hard, and we left the site live for about a month, and we gave users ways to export their data, which I thought was really important, and I think is something to keep in mind is I mean, you don't have to do it till it's absolutely necessary, but it's nice to have earlier ways for users to sort of export their data and move on. And we had suggestions for, if you want to move your Pounce data over to like a WordPress blog or a movable type blog or, a TypePad blog or a Vox blog, all these different options. We had ways that you could do that pretty easily, and that took about a month. So it took I think the whole process was probably 2 months.
Então, você falou do Pounce, que ele tinha a questão de você poder mandar links ou mensagens ou compartilhar arquivos, várias coisas diferentes, a questão do foco. E aí eu lembrei, queria fazer uma pergunta se você acha que isso tem a ver, o motivo do Pounce não ter dado certo, se tem a ver com o mesmo motivo do Google Wave também não ter dado certo.
Thanks. That's a great question, actually. That's really interesting. I think we probably can agree that some of what makes Google Wave difficult to use or why it hasn't been widely adopted is because it is too complicated. And yes, I do think that was why Pounce, we could have seen more adoption if it had been a little bit simpler. At the time, we were competing very heavily we were being compared to Twitter very heavily. I don't think we intended to really compete with them. We ended up getting compared, and they were very simple. You could just post text, and that's it. And we were very complicated. You could send links and photos and files and things, and I think it made Twitter seem like a very easy choice, which now makes me sort of question what Twitter's doing with new Twitter. I kind of look at new Twitter and I'm like, okay, but maybe the better way to do that is to move gradually from something easy to explain. So if Wave had started off very simply as just a message board that you could communicate with your friends, and then later on added live updating or added maps integration or those things, added them on slowly, added the bots on slowly, it might have been a better approach. I would definitely do that this time. Next product I build, I really like that incremental slow approach where it's very, very simple at first, almost too simple, and then adding more stuff on.
Bom, minha dúvida é assim, no Pounce, qual foi os meios de divulgação que você seguiu? Você divulgava primeiro entre os seus amigos e eles divulgavam entre os outros amigos deles e assim ia? Ou você divulgou no Google, alguma coisa assim, de forma paga? Ou se foi só entre amigos?
Okay, so what did we do to acquire users or get people to use the site? We never did any advertising, though that is certainly a valid way to get new users for a site. Things like Facebook ads are probably pretty efficient these days for getting people to try social sites. But what we ended up doing, so we started off being invite only. I don't know if anybody used Pounce when it was invite only, but you had a limited number of invites that you could send to friends. So you had 5 or 6 invites that you could send to your friends to sort of start your friend group. And I think that's why a lot of people had 5 or 6 friends. It's because we gave you 5 or 6 invites and you could invite people to try the site, and then you would be friends with them on the site. So that helped because people used those invites wisely and were, inviting their friends, and it was sort of kind of like joining a secret club. So we ended up having people get really excited about the invites and start asking who has an invite, that sort of thing, which is pretty cool. Kevin Rose had done Dig before, and he has the show Dignation, and I think he had mentioned Pounce on Dignation, so we were able to get publicity and people trying it. Dig users tried out Pounce, and people watching Dignation tried it out. So that was a good way to sort of get everything seeded and started as well. But after that, we had a system where you could check your address book and send invites to your Gmail contacts. We also had ways to invite people from Flickr, Dig, Facebook, and Twitter. So ways you could import your contacts and at the time it was sort of becoming popular, like a popular thing to do those. And now I see these invite things everywhere, right? Like get your, invite your Facebook friends to join the site, and Facebook Connect actually helps with that a lot. But Facebook Connect wasn't even around back then. It's crazy to say. But there are a lot of ways now that I think it's pretty easy to sort of get started. I mean, getting users, if you're doing a social site, is your biggest challenge. It's your number one priority and biggest challenge. The number one thing you have to do is get people using your site, and there are different techniques for doing so, and a lot of interesting different ones. Of course, making it easy for people to invite friends is important. One of the coolest ones I saw lately was this site that when you signed up for, so they got you to sign up for the site because they said it's in beta right now and it's not live, but put in your email address and pick your username. And so people were rushing to this site before it had even opened so they could reserve their username, which I thought was pretty brilliant. Like, that's a pretty brilliant marketing strategy. Everybody wants to save their username, so they got a bunch of users just from people who wanted to get their username. Are those users going to be long-term, lasting, engaged users? Who knows? But it's kind of an interesting strategy. So that's what happened with Pounce. And I'm sure it would be different every time you do a startup and how people end up finding out about it.
Oi, como e por que vocês tomaram a decisão de vender o Pounce e por que naquela época e não depois ou antes?
These are really tough questions. I don't know if I really should go into too much detail about the sale of Pounce, and it's not really even necessary because I think that every startup is sort of different in how these sort of things work out. But I think we had acquisition offers before. Some of them didn't work out for different reasons. But at the time, I think in 2007, the economy was really bad in the U.S., and a lot of investors in Silicon Valley were getting scared about their investments, and Pounce had we were running out of cash, so we sort of had the choice of, sell or run out of money, or, go through the effort of trying to raise money in late 2008, which just wasn't, 2008, not 2007, sorry. 2008 was a bad time, and everyone was getting scared about the economy. So it made sense. I mean, these things are really tricky, and it's something that you'll deal with a lot if you have a company. It's really hard. So.
No Baconfile, o seu outro projeto, você depende de uma ideia muito difícil, que é as pessoas se cadastrarem no Amazon SW, no Amazon Stream. Quão grande é o funil das pessoas não se cadastrarem, e como você consegue aliviar isso?
Okay, it's a really good question. You're bringing up Baconfile. Baconfile is a site that depends on Amazon S3 for its file sharing. So if you have your own Amazon S3 account, you can sign up for Baconfile, and it provides a web UI for uploading and downloading your files and sharing them with other people and posting them on Twitter and things like this that you want to do with files, but it depends on S3. You have to sign up for an Amazon S3 account, which is a fairly technical and hard thing to do. And when I was designing Baconfile, the idea was actually I wanted to build the perfect API, which is a really weird reason to start a site. But I wanted to make a really beautiful API, and I wanted to make one based on like WebDAV and file sharing. So I was inspired by the Apache file browser. Anybody has seen that? You know, like where you click on, like I wanted that, but I wanted it for anybody to be able to use and upload things on the web, and you don't have to run a server or anything like that. And ideally Baconfile would be free for everyone to use and upload, and you wouldn't need an S3 account. The problem with that is that file hosting costs a lot of money, right? So Flickr, for example, every quarter breaks even on their file hosting costs versus what they make off of selling pro accounts, and they have lots of users, and they have lots of people paying for their pro accounts. And so I didn't want to be in the position where I was hosting a lot of files and having to pay for them out of my own pocket. So I said, what's the easiest way that I can try this idea out without costing me any money? And I said, I'll have people sign up with their S3 accounts. And so Baconfile has about 2,000 users, I think. And I think about 1,000 of them have connected their Amazon accounts properly, which is a very small site, very small. And it's okay for a side project because it never needs to be really big. It's more of like a personal project. And I don't think it makes a very good company for that exact reason. So I won't go on anymore about it, but...
Ok, pessoal, nós não temos mais tempo. Estamos com o tempo esgotado, mas eu me concedo um tempo para mais uma pergunta final. É rapidinho. Last question. Você ainda se lembra que você usou Python pela primeira vez quando você usou? Está processando.
It was only 4 years ago. Only 4. So it wasn't that long ago. 4 or 5, maybe. I guess I used it in school, but I don't remember in school. But when I switched from Java, I do remember using Python for the very first time, because it was fairly recently. And Pounce was the first Python app I ever wrote. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I went in to do a Django sprint, and I didn't know what to do for the sprint because I wasn't very good at Python and not very good at Django. I kind of was learning it as I went, which I think is a very valid thing to do. I mean, I think that's fun. Python's pretty easy to learn. It was actually pretty nice language to learn, and it was fun. But I went into the Django sprint and I said, what can I do? I don't really know Python, and I don't know Django that well. And Jacob Kaplan-Moss, who's one of the BDFLs of Django, said to me, he's like, why don't you take some screenshots, new screenshots for the tutorial. So take new screenshots and post them on the tutorial. And I started working, and I go, how do I create a Django site? And he goes, what? I'm like, I've only ever made one of them. Where do I find the script to create a Django site? And he just died laughing because, of course, Pounce had been out for a while now. He's like, you only made Pounce? And I was like, yeah, I only made Pounce. So yeah, I still feel very new to Python and new to Django. But that's also, I want that to be sort of inspiring, not like, I had never done a lot. But I think you can go really far with a project if you sort of keep working on it and really stick to it. Python's really easy for starting websites, and Django's really great, so.
Thank you. Thank you again. Pessoal, dando continuidade então, nesta sala nós teremos, coitados, MetaPython reciclado, JS, queimando o que sobrou do cérebro de vocês. E no auditório B, começando agora, interessante, Python e segurança da informação, desenvolvendo exploits em Python com o Oscar Isauro Bacelar. O RBP está me comentando aqui também que a infra para RBPs está aberta lá embaixo. A infra de Open Spaces, lá embaixo está aberta para o pessoal poder participar. E o Léo ainda está coletando as palestras relâmpagos para mais tarde. Não esqueçam de devolver os equipamentos aqui na frente e pegar esse documento de identidade de volta.